He casually answered and said, "Glad you called. Last night was incredible. How about dinner at 6:30?" I sat there in shock, but my revenge, oh, it was swift and absolutely merciless. I sat in the boardroom, the city skyline stretching out beyond the glass windows, a sea of concrete and glass that symbolized everything I had worked for. The deal I had just finalized with Olivier was a monumental achievement. It wasn't just a business triumph, it was a statement. We were on top together. But that morning, there was a shadow hanging over me. Isabel, my wife, had been distant for months, and though I ignored the bite, signs at first, something told me she wasn't the same person anymore. The constant late nights at the office, the sudden need for space, the strange looks when I asked simple questions. There was something happening, something I couldn't name but felt deep inside. And as I sat there reviewing documents for our next project, that feeling grew stronger. I trusted Isabel implicitly. She was more than my wife. She was my partner in everything. The first time we met, it was like magic. Her laugh, her intelligence, her beauty, it all captivated me. We built a life together and I thought it was unshakable. But trust is a fragile thing. Olivier, my business partner, leaned back in his chair and casually flicked through his phone as I signed the final papers. His demeanor was relaxed, too relaxed. I noticed it but didn't think much of it at the time. We had been friends for years. What could go wrong? Then my world broke into 1,000 pieces. Olivier's phone buzzed loudly across the polished glass table, breaking the rhythm of our conversation. He picked it up without a bay. Second thought, his face lighting up as he saw the caller ID. "Isabel," he said, almost as if he were welcoming an old friend. "Hey, glad you called. Last night was incredible. How about dinner at 6:30? I'll make the reservation at that place you like." I froze. The words barely registered in my brain at first, but when they did, it felt like the ground beneath me cracked wide open. My wife, Isabel, the woman I trusted, the woman I loved having dinner with, my business partner, and the tone in Olivier's voice, familiar, intimate, casual, sent a wave of nausea through me. I looked at Olivier, but he didn't seem to notice my shock. He was too comfortable, too nonchalant, as if this was just another ordinary conversation. Last night was incredible. He had just said it, and Isabel had heard it. I knew it was true. They were involved. Betrayal was no longer just a possibility. It was the bitter, sharp reality that had just torn through my life. I sat in stunned silence, my mind racing, trying to put the pieces together. Olivier was my best friend. Isabel was my wife. They were supposed to be the people I could count on, but they had betrayed me in the most fundamental way. Olivier finished his call and set the phone down with a lazy grin on his face. "You know, I've got to say," he said, looking at me, "I never thought things would end up this way, but you were always so focused on the work." Isabel needed someone who could keep up, I guess. My heart dropped into my stomach. He wasn't even sorry. No guilt, no remorse, just a casual admission of the affair as if it were nothing more than a business transaction. I stood up, my body trembling with rage and disbelief. The man I considered a brother was now the man sleeping with my wife. And Isabel, my wife, had been planning dinners, arranging meetings, carrying on behind my back. I couldn't comprehend how they could do this to me, to us. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I finally managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. Olivier shrugged, unfazed. "Look, man, I didn't mean for things to get complicated, but we've both been in this for a while now. Isabel? Well, you know how she is. She's always been the type to go for what she wants." Every word he said stung like a knife. My trust had been shattered, and the silence between us was thick with the weight of his words. I wanted to lash out, I wanted to scream, but I knew this wasn't the time. This wasn't the way I would take back control of my life. I had always been the kind of person who thought ahead, who made calculated moves. This wouldn't be any different. They were going to feel every ounce of betrayal they had caused me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, but instead of calling Isabel or confronting her right then and there, I dialed a number I hadn't used in years, my lawyer's. Danielle, I said, my voice tight. I need a divorce. I'm done. My lawyer's voice was calm, almost relieved. Of course, Alexandra will start the process right away. That was the moment I touched, the moment I had decided. My life was no longer just about Isabel and Olivier. It was about me, and they would regret ever crossing me. 2 days later, Isabel was at home when I returned. Her eyes widened when she saw me standing at the door, my face unreadable. She tried to smile, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. Alexandra, you're home early, she said, her voice too high, too forced. I didn't answer her immediately. I walked in, my steps slow, deliberate. Isabel, I said, finally breaking the silence, we need to talk. She looked confused for a moment. Then something shifted. She knew what I had found out. I leaned against the wall, my posture cold, unwavering. I know about you and Olivier. Her face went pale, and she took a step back. What? What are you talking about? I didn't let her get away with the lie. I heard everything. The phone call last night, dinner at 6:30. My voice was steady, cutting through the room like a blade. How long has this been going on? She opened her mouth to speak, but the words were tangled. She was caught. I watched her crumble in front of me. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, was no longer the person standing before me. And as much as it not pained me, I knew I had to let go. I'm divorcing you, I said simply, and I'm taking everything. The silence that followed was deafening. Isabel stood frozen, her hands shaking, unable to speak. I turned and walked away, leaving her behind, but not without purpose. The next few months passed in a blur. I threw myself into the divorce process, meticulously planning every move. It wasn't just about taking away Isabel's luxury and comforts. It was about making them both pay for what they had done. But I didn't want to just hurt them. I wanted them to feel the full weight of their actions. I used every connection, every resource to bring their world crashing down. And when the moment came when I made my final move, it wasn't just personal, it was calculated, precise, and perfect. The divorce proceedings dragged on for months. Isabel fought me every step of the way, trying to maintain her grip on the lifestyle I had built for us. But she didn't realize how much power I held. The financial resources, the legal strategy, the connections, I had them all in place. Every time she attempted to argue, I was one step ahead. Olivier tried to intervene once, but I made it clear that he was in no position to help her. Through it all, I couldn't help but think back to the days when we were happy, when Isabel and I would walk through the park, hand in hand, laughing and talking about our future. It hurt to know that those moments were now tainted, that the woman I had built a life with had destroyed everything for a fleeting affair. And the worst part? She thought she could get away with it. But I had learned the hard way that when betrayal runs this deep, there is no room for sentimentality. My heart had hardened, and now nothing would stop me from getting what I deserved. The day of the final hearing came, and I was ready. Isabel, in her desperation, tried to settle at the last minute. She wanted to keep the house, her extravagant lifestyle. She even begged for a second chance, but I was resolute. No, I told her coldly, you betrayed me, you betrayed us, and now you'll pay for it. The judge's gavel fell, and with it, everything Isabel had worked so hard to maintain crumbled. The assets were divided, and I made sure she got as little as possible. The mansion she loved so much was mine now, and I had it sold. The art, the expensive jewelry, the vacations, everything she thought she had earned by sleeping with my business partner was gone. The court order came down swiftly. The assets were transferred, and I walked out of that courtroom with a quiet sense of triumph. But there was no satisfaction in seeing her defeated. There was no joy in knowing that her life was now a shattered version of what it had been. I had stripped her of everything, but she was still the woman who had betrayed me, and that was enough. While Isabel was busy dealing with the consequences of our divorce, I turned my attention to Olivier. He had been the one to break my trust most egregiously, and I wasn't done with him. At first, I thought about confronting him directly, maybe showing up at his office, demanding an explanation. But I realized that wasn't the right way. He had to feel the sting of his own actions, just like Isabel had. I went after him professionally. The game of business was where he felt most at ease, where he believed he could manipulate others. But now the tables were turned. I had everything in place to ensure that his empire came crashing down. I started by undermining his business dealings. I contacted the partners he had neglected to disclose to me. I made sure they knew about his personal life, the affair, the lies. Slowly, I managed to sabotage his credibility in the industry. Deals that he had been hoping would elevate his status crumbled one after the other. Investors pulled out, and clients began to turn their backs on him. He couldn't figure out why. His success was slipping through his fingers. But he soon found himself cornered. Olivier called me a few times during this period, his voice frantic. He threatened me, begged me to stop, but I didn't pick up. The damage was already done. Eventually, his downfall came in a spectacular fashion. A major contract that he had been courting for months was canceled after a damaging article was published about his personal life. It was written in such a way that it was impossible to deny. The business world now knew about his betrayal of me, and Isabel's affair was exposed for everyone to see. His reputation was in tatters. Olivier had lost everything: his business, his credibility, his social standing, and as I stood back and watched it all unfold, I couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of satisfaction. He had thought he could take my wife, take my life without consequences. Now he was paying for it. In the months that followed, I began to rebuild. The pain of the betrayal never truly faded, but it became manageable. I took long walks in the city, clearing my head and thinking about what came next. I had lost a lot, but I also gained something, a sense of strength and resilience that I didn't know I had. I had faced the deepest betrayal and I had survived. I started taking more time for myself, focusing on the things that truly mattered. I reconnected with old friends, people I had neglected in the whirlwind of my marriage and business. I focused on my career, on projects that inspired me, not just the ones that brought in money. I also took the time to truly reflect on what had happened: Isabel's betrayal, Olivier's lies, all of it. It had tested me in ways I never thought possible, but it also taught me something important. Never again would I let someone take me for granted. Trust, once broken, cannot be repaired. I did have a moment of pity for Isabel, maybe even sympathy. She had thrown away a life she could have had. But in the end, she made her choices and I made mine. As for Olivier, I heard whispers about him here and there, how he was still trying to rebuild his reputation, still trying to salvage the business he had so recklessly destroyed. But I knew something he didn't. No matter how hard he tried, he would never regain what he had lost. The consequences of his betrayal were irreversible. Time passed, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. I was no longer the man I had been when I first walked into that boardroom, full of hope and trust. But I wasn't the broken man Isabel and Olivier thought I would become. I had rebuilt and I had learned. The only thing left to do was move forward. In the quiet moments when I walked through the park alone or sat in my favorite cafe with a book, I realized something important. Revenge had not been about inflicting pain. It had been about reclaiming my power. It had been about taking back my life. Isabel and Olivier were part of my past, a chapter I had closed, and as I looked toward the future, I knew I was free. The final thought that lingered in my mind was a quote I had come across one day. The greatest revenge is living well, and in that I had found peace. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. If this story moved you, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to Lauren's story. I've noticed that over 80% of you watch these stories but aren't subscribed yet. One simple click helps bring you more powerful tales just like this. By subscribing, you're not just following a channel, you're joining a community that values deep, meaningful storytelling. Let's continue exploring these heartfelt journeys together. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss our next gripping story. And if this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support means the world, and together we keep these stories alive.